graduation ceremonies, presided over a citizenship, and also welcomed a number of Chinese visitor groups over the summer. Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 5, statements by members of the Council Cabinet. We now move to statements from members of the Council Cabinet. I understand that no statements have been received on this occasion. Item 6, questions from the members of the public. I will now hear questions from members of the public to Cabinet members. We've received 5 in total. As we have done for recent meetings, we'll move directly to the supplementary questions unless a response has not already been provided in the booklet. First of all, I have Vanessa Boone.
She's not here.
No, not here, thank you. I'll move on. Mr. Michael Walsh, have you got a supplementary question?
Yes. Basically, do we know what the council is going to do? Because obviously the residents in Mackworth have asked the question. There was issues that were raised and cleared out by Primson Homes, so they was on the understanding that it was now ready to be adapted by the City Council.
Councillor Carl, have you got enough detail there to answer?
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I haven't got any details on that with me, but if you just send me an email, I promise to get back to you straight away, but it's difficult to give you the answer here.
Okay, now moving on to Mr. Simon Bacon. I know it's a silly question, Simon, but have you got a supplementary question? And is there somebody who's going to answer for Councillor Swan, Councillor Peatfield?
She's here.
Oh, you're there. I've got apologies for you there. Just pop up, yeah. Put your hand up. Lovely. Okay. Simon, if you'd like to give your supplementary question.
I have got a supplementary question, Mr. Mayor, as you probably identified. Councillor Swan, thank you for your answer in relation to the wood chip material. As a volunteer active in the upkeep of parks in the city and noting the lack of availability of such material for mulching, planting schemes, etc., do you think it would be better to make use of this material in the city's parks instead of shipping it off to be burnt for energy?
Hi Simon, thank you for the question. You know, it would seem extremely sensible to say yes, so I'm going to pass this over and speak to Nduki after this meeting and make sure that we get that balance to ensure that you've got the mulching required for parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we've got a question from Sam Ward, who's not here, and I believe Helen Hitchcock is here to ask the question. Do you want to ask your supplementary question?
Yes, of course. So thank you again, Councillor Swan, for your reply. Do you know if you're on track to meet the 2035 target to be a net zero city? And if not, when will we have any revised target update available?
Thank you, Sam, for that. I think there's been a tremendous amount of work undertaken in this particular area. I was only talking to an officer the other day and I feel like we're just digging the trenches. But the question is, are we moving fast enough considering the fact that we are in a climate emergency? The answer is probably no. This will require the support of every councillor in this chamber. We may have some rusties left here, not quite sure, but I hope there aren't many. We have to be driven by the data. In terms of carbon emissions, we've got more work to do in this city, but that will require infrastructure, investment in public transport. I'm hoping that with the combined authority that we will be able to move in the right direction. Thank you.
And now we move to Simon Bacon again. Have you got a supplementary question, Simon?
I have, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you for your response, Councillor. Can you provide me with a copy of the identified schedule which will aid my inspection of the Council's 2023-24 accounts, please?
Thank you, Simon. Always good to speak with you. I will have a chat with the officers and upon advice, we will take necessary actions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7, Questions related to Derbyshire Fire Authority and Derby Homes. None have been received. Item 8, questions from non-council cabinet members. Again, we now move to questions from non-council cabinet members. 23 have been received ahead of the meeting. Again, I will not be asking an officer to read the summary out of the questions. I will simply be asking if you've got a supplementary question. Councillor Eyre.
So I've got question F first in mind. Thank you, Cabinet Member. Thank you for the answer to this question. I'm delighted to hear that we're exploring bringing more cycling events back to the city. I had a fantastic time at the Tour of Britain, and I know everyone that I spoke to there did as well. I hope that we can work cross-party on this. As the City Council's cycling champion, I'd be delighted to bring more events and work with administration to do so. Will the Cabinet Member take me up on this offer?
Apologies, Councillors. I've just looked at the question booklet, and seems to be an error in the booklet in that the questions have restarted at question A for the non-council questions from non-council cabinet members, but questions A to E aren't in the booklet. Yeah, so in the book, we've got F for Councillor Fouch, Councillor Peatfield. So I'm not sure, yeah. Okay. Do you want to jump back? Okay, that's fine. Go to Councillor Fouch next then.
Okay.
Well, first of all, it was good meeting you, Councillor, at the event, and you know, I dare say it was also good to stand alongside a cycling champion in the city. And of course, I would definitely love to work cross-party with you. We've done so on the previous committee, and I would love to see that going on. And in fact, I'll do better than that right now. I've been invited by the team at Derby Arena to come try out the velodrome. I wonder if you'll be happy to join me on that.
Thank you. Well, now we get back on track. Councillor Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask all the things in the answers, how much are all these extras going to cost, and will they be all in place by the time that the Beckett Well actually opens?
Thank you, Councillor Falk. It's an ongoing process that we're working on right now in terms of the city centre safety around the Beckett Well Arena. We're working with lots and lots of partners, so there isn't always a cost. Sometimes it's partnership working. There's also people that we are going to be requesting support from, such as the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Mayor of the East Midlands. So it's not really a matter of what is it going to cost the council, and that work starts with our Purple Flag initiation and renewing of that process and application, but that's just the start. What we don't want to do is just apply for the Purple Flag, say, yay, we got it again for another year, and then that's it. That will be a jumping off point for far more action and activity on city centre safety, especially in the nighttime economy.
I've now got Councillor John Wright.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Kozlowski, for the reply. It does not appear to identify any impact on the medium-term financial plan. Unlike the winter fuel allowance, HM Treasury did do an impact assessment for the application of VAT on private schools and states that on average their costs will rise by 15%. Have you considered this impact assessment?
Thank you, Councillor Wright. We are looking at the medium-term financial plan right now, and I will ensure that this is an area that we do consider. We are keeping a close eye on the changes
to school places as a result of developments, or as you say, the charitable status being removed from the schools. So we'll get back to you when we have further information. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member let us all know what measures he and the Refuse Department are taking to ensure that the situation with numerous bin routes not being emptied doesn't occur in the future, please?
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Sometimes in order to get ahead, we must look back at where we're coming from, and I'd like to borrow from some wise words of wisdom you gave when you were the former cabinet member in this position. You said, I would like to pass on my thanks for the hard work that the refuse team are doing in these difficult times. I'd ask residents to please be patient and help us by reducing their waste where possible. We will ensure that black and blue bin collections are prioritized, and we'll do our best to maintain a full brown bin collection service. Where we can't empty bins, we will do everything we can to get these collected as soon as possible after the scheduled collection. Now, this shows that this has been an age-old thing. I only just wish that, having made that lovely plea, you hadn't cut some staff from the team and, of course, depleted the reserves, which made it hard for us to carry on. But that notwithstanding, we've rebalanced the rounds, and soon you will see, and residents will be able to see the effect of this in waste collection. And just to give you some ideas of how there have been changes as a result of these rebalanced rounds. In the week of 20th to 23rd August, we had a total of about 326 missed streets. As at the last count on the week of 10th to 13th September, we had a total of only 149 missed streets. Now, when we service around 4,750 streets, having just 140, and I don't say that lightly, but having 149 means that at least this rebalancing exercise is working, and I would like to sit with you to gain from your wisdom about how we can move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much for your answer, Councillor Kozlowski. As Cabinet Member for Finance, would you support any government move to remove the single person discount on council tax? Yes or no?
It's too complicated to give a yes or no, Councillor Smale, so I will say that any proposals will be considered by the council, and we await the government's budget in October. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's incredible that after nearly a year, the council still hasn't established who is legally responsible for the collapsed wall in Micklehove. Simply saying that the council has decided it is not responsible for it is not going to get it fixed. This cannot keep going on, so can Micklehove residents just finally get a straight answer? How much longer is repairing the wall going to take?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. It's a really good question because I understand your frustrations. We've also got a wall that is also fallen in Darley, alongside a bridge. But I have been reassured that both you and your ward councillors have been constantly updated with regards to the state of play of this wall. If that is not the case, and you refute that, then maybe we can organise a meeting to try and discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to Councillor Matt Holmes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Government are reviewing the National Planning Policy Framework with an expectation of publication on changes this December. And given the government's other policy shifts in regards to housing, I believe two things have occurred. South Derbyshire District Council have jumped the gun, either by design or without due consideration of the pending changes on national policy that may significantly alter the approach of local authorities, and that you've been blindsided by their publication of the draft local plan, and it looks to impose a massive urban extension to communities that have already taken their fair share, more than their fair share, of housing growth. So can I ask you what you propose to do next as Cabinet Member in regards to South Derbyshire's local plan and its impact and significant consequences on Derby City?
Thank you for your question, Matthew. I believe you've been in contact with Paul Clark with emails and phone calls, etc. So you probably know as much as he does. And if you want to know the details of this, your supplementary question, the detailed answer, shall I say, and please send it to me, and I will ask Paul if he can supply you with any further information. But you know very well that our officers are in constant contact with Amber Valley and South Derbyshire District to try to keep up with the number of houses that we've had to ask them to build on our behalf. So whatever it is that you haven't been told, I honestly can't think if Paul Clark can give you any more information on that, because as I said, I think last 3 weeks you've been emailing him. But I am more than happy to ask him to provide you with the supplementary, answers to your supplementary question.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan McGeehan.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Peatfield, for your response and update. I'd just like to ask, does this represent a U-turn in officer advice then? Because the way that I'm reading condition 1 on the original planning application from April 2021, the demolition cannot commence until the vote has taken place in terms of the new development. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. The planning condition predicated two things. For one, a comprehensive scheme of redevelopment is approved in writing, which has happened. And number two, a contractual arrangement for delivery of that scheme, which we have. I will point out that previously, when your administration was planning to put a theatre there actually weren't fully comprehensive plans for the rest of the site, because the theatre would have only taken up a small amount of that, a portion of that site. So, you know, whereas actually our plans show comprehensive detail for the entire site. So I don't think there's any misinterpretation. Consultees and officers are working with the framework of the planning conditions to arrive at a well-founded decision that's fully informed and justified by the submitted documentation. Now, I'm sure we can all agree that we do need to see this long-standing matter resolved without delay to give confidence that redevelopment can and will take place for the benefit of the wider Derby cityscape and our citizens, and to finally and utterly bring down the assembly rooms and put something vibrant and fantastic in its place for all of our city to use.
Thank you. Move on to Councillor Mulhall now.
No supplementary, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Has it really got to me? I've lost the notes I wrote on my screen. We're 2 years since the last. Thank you for your answer. We're 2 years since the last set of leaflets went out. Though a quick roll call of people around me said they couldn't actually remember a recycling leaflet in October 22. So maybe it's not an annual leaflet, maybe a biennial leaflet will be a good idea. But can I suggest that we have one with a QR code on it and with the website address, and it's sticky and applied to blue recycling bins, so that it can be there longer term, and we can upgrade the website with any changes, and people haven't got an excuse.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. That is a fantastic idea. I'll have a chat with the officers so that we can cost it up, but you know, I do believe that is a good idea, and we should explore that.
Councillor Lonsdale.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I move back to Councillor Eyre now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Noaha, for your answer. I was slightly surprised at the answer, given the discussion we had at the Community Scrutiny Board around the PPO roles. I thought we might see one or two changes. But the Cabinet Member may recall from that one of the concerns my group had was around PPOs only being available to some wards of the council and not others in future changes. I'm glad it says there are no planned changes, but plans can change and change very quickly. So can the Cabinet Member categorically rule out a situation in the 25-26 financial year where some wards have access to PPOs but not all?
Thank you, Councillor. And of course, I was in that meeting and we did jointly talk about that. Whilst we may have our wishes, all these things, as you well know, are dictated by budgetary constraints. And left to me, I would love to see dedicated PPOs in every single street. But again, it's the budget, isn't it? And we will continue to look at this. And I'm happy to receive any suggestions you may have about this. Thank you. Oh, and Mr. Mayor, following the mispronunciation of my name yet again, after we spoke this afternoon, and following your own suggestion, you do owe me another pint.
I can see this term of office costing me a lot of money. Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This disappointing response suggests that Bramblebrook will now not be getting anything more than a patch-up repair for the foreseeable future. So can I ask the Cabinet Member if he would meet with myself and my fellow councillors at Bramblebrook Park to see for yourself why a patch-up repair is just not going to be good enough?
Okay, we're back on track now. Councillor Morgan McGeehan.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Thank you. Oh yeah, happy to have that conversation. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan McGeehan.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You say no?
No question.
Okay. Councillor Mulhall.
Councillor Mulhall.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to thank Councillor Swan for your answer. In September last year, the Cabinet Member spoke of concerns regarding the construction period and the proposed completed scheme and the impact of the carbon footprint on our city and our people. So could you please elaborate on what specific concerns regarding the proposed completed scheme you have, and could you please clarify if these concerns represent the views of the Labour Council administration, or are they shared by council officers as well?
Thank you, Councillor. As with all major infrastructure projects, the administration remains committed to carefully reviewing all aspects, including community feedback, environmental impact and long-term benefits. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. I really appreciate the potential for more involvement in budget development. I know it's not going to be easy. Can we ask the LGA for their advice on backbench engagement and share that with backbench members with the way of trying to find something that is going to work for as many people as possible?
Absolutely, Councillor Kerr. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've already written to the Secretary of State for Transport, and I'd certainly would urge you and expect you actually to do the same, given your role and given the government's review of this and many other major transport schemes. However, unless you want to tell me otherwise, it has to be assumed that you and all the Labour administration are not supportive of the Derby A38 junction improvement scheme, because you seem entirely unable to speak of any stated benefits, and not forgetting the need for its delivery due to housing growth, now mostly delivered, that was conditioned on its delivery.
No further follow-up.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kozlowski, for your answer. Neighbourhood board chairs need absolute certainty in how the City Council is going to administer their budget. So I'm actually very pleased to have this answer because it finally proves that the statement given by the previous Communities Cabinet member that funding could be rolled over in the years that I asked about was incorrect, as I said at the time. Hopefully, the new Cabinet member is more on the ball than the predecessor for that role was. So could she confirm whether there are any plans to change this and allow funding to be rolled over in future?
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry to be unexciting about it, but there are no current plans. I haven't got an answer for you at the moment, and it is part of the process that we're going through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan McGeehan.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Khan, for your thorough response to the question. My main concern in raising the question was the predicted surge in non-fault evictions predicted by charities such as Shelter. And whilst you've touched on the expansion of stock available to house people in emergency situations, I wonder if you could elaborate, because the answer, according to what Shelter are predicting, won't fill the gap.
Thank you for your question and supplementary. The bill is introduced on the 11th of September. It's not due to come into force until summer 25, and we haven't yet got an exact date for it. The document itself, as you know, is very long. It's online. You can have a look at it. But suffice to say, we are working hard and making sure that we are prepared if, as you say, there might be a surge in homelessness because of Section 21 notices. We have acquired Abbey Lodge for that. I am currently working with officers on a number of properties that we could purchase or renovate to make sure we can accommodate if there is a surge. But Section 21 is not new. Landlords have known about this for years. You know, it's not as if it's a new thing and everybody's going to jump on it. If they wanted to use Section 21, all landlords know this bill was being introduced. There hasn't been a surge, and I don't know why the scaremongering by you as to say that there's going to be a surge in numbers. This is not something new. It's been here for a very long time.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I recognise that it's not easy to give up using pesticides, but it is something which other countries, I think most notably France, but also Germany, are recognising that we need to be doing. Glyphosate specifically is recognised in some quarters for causing cancer. It's likely to lead to higher levels of Parkinson's disease and to more autism. Now, so the implications about what we're doing in our environmental services are impacting on our public health issues. And they don't seem to be joined up. We passed a resolution 3 years ago, which seems to have stalled. And I'd just like to know whether there is actually likelihood to actually move forward on that resolution to try and reduce the amount of use and actually look at finding alternatives, which might include not just pesticides and alternatives to pesticides, but looking at the way we prevent the weeds growing in the first place.
I think that was... Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Very good suggestions and very good follow-up question, and I think it's something that we should look at. I'm happy to have a conversation with you outside this chambers concerning that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Eyre.
No supplementary, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And again, Councillor Kerr.
The X38, in case people don't know, which is the question, there is a qualifying agreement between Arriva and Trent Barton because they've had been for 30 years running a joint service. Now, if, when there is such an agreement, we still aren't allowed to organise a meeting, and we have failed to do that alongside the agenda of some other bus service meeting, then I think we need to be writing to the Secretary of State to review this aspect of bus regulation so that we can enable bus companies to talk to each other when it's sensible for them to do so. With your permission, Mr Mayor, may I suggest that our Cabinet member writes to the Secretary of State to suggest that, if that is the case?
Well retrieved, Councillor. Well done.
Thank you, Lucy. I most definitely will.
Right, we'll move on if we've not missed anybody out after that. Item 9 is a minute extract 19/24 of the Health and Wellbeing Board held on the 5th of September 2024. So the next item of business is a minute extract from the recent meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board seeking an amendment to the committee's terms of reference to incorporate functions previously undertaken by the Children and Family Learners Board. Councillor Martin, as a current chair of Health and Wellbeing.
So Councillor Peatfield moves this.
Yes, can you move that, Councillor Peatfield? Have we a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Any further speakers or any other amendments, etc.? Can we move to the vote, please? All those in favour? Any against? That's passed, thank you. Item 10, Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report 2023 to 24. We'll now receive the annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny, which provides a summary of the activity undertaken by the Council's 6 established Overview and Scrutiny Boards during the 23 to 24 municipal year. Councillor Poulter, as Chair of the Executive Scrutiny Board last year, will you please present the report to the Council?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of points in relation to this. Firstly, to thank the officers both for their work throughout the municipal year and in the preparation of this report. We all know that scrutiny is absolutely vital to the openness, transparency and governance of this council, and it's taken extremely seriously by the members of those executive scrutiny boards and others. And also it will be equally important when it comes to scrutinising the work of the East Midlands County Combined Authority, for which arrangements are coming into place. That said, there are a couple of points of concern I need to raise in that the report in my summary and the officers have highlighted the fact that actually 72% of the recommendations put to Cabinet on behalf of the Scrutiny Board were either declined, ignored or not positively acted upon, and that simply is not good enough. The Cabinet needs to respond more positively to the recommendations of the Scrutiny Boards. And the other thing of concern is, yes, to keep an eye on scrutiny of the County Combined Authority, but also to make sure that we pay the right dues consideration to the day-to-day scrutiny of this council going forward. Other than that, Mr Mayor, I suggest the report is accepted as printed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. Have we a seconder, please? Councillor Eyre, thank you. Are there any further speakers on this? Can I move to the vote then? All in favour? Any against? That is moved. Item 11, Standards Committee Annual Report 2023 to 24. The next item of business is the annual report of the Standards Committee. The report provides a summary of the activity of the committee and an overview of complaints handling during the preceding 12 months. Councillor Khan, as the Chair of the Standards Committee during the period to which the report relates, will you please move the recommendations?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just quickly to say, I'm no longer Chair of the committee, and I would just like to thank the officers, my fellow councillors for working with and supporting me in the last year that I was Chair, and to move the report as printed.
Thank you. Can I take a seconder, please? Any further speakers? Can we move to the vote, though? All in favour?
Yes.
Any against? That's passed then. Thank you. Item 12, urgent non-executive decisions made by the Chief Executive. We now consider a report detailing recent urgent decisions made by the Chief Executive. There is one decision for us to note relating to the Council's appointment to the East Midlands Combined Authority, arising out of changes to the Council's executive made at the last meeting of full Council. I will now move the recommendation to note the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Peatfield, thank you. Can we move to the vote, please? All in favour? Thank you. That's passed. I'll now move on to items 13 to 16, notice of motion. We will now consider several notices of motion. Please note I've used the Mayor's prerogative to reorder the motion, and we will now take reinstatement of the winter fuel allowance for Derby's pensioners first. Reinstatement of the winter fuel allowance for Derby's pensioners, moved by Councillor Smale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Almost 12 weeks ago, this newly elected Labour government, under the premiership of Sir Keir Starmer, stood on the steps of 10 Downing Street, addressing the nation saying, "We need change." And he repeated, along with his senior cabinet colleagues, that adults are in charge. Well, unfortunately, Mr Mayor, there's been no evidence of the adults being in charge, but certainly significant change, and that is for the worst. Today, we are here at a critical juncture, where decisions made in Westminster resonate profoundly within our communities in Derby, particularly among our most vulnerable citizens, our pensioners. The recent decision by this Labour government to remove the winter fuel payment to our elderly residents is going to cause great harm. This allowance has been more than just financial support. It has been a lifeline for nearly 36,000 pensioners in Derby, who depend on it to keep their homes warm during the harsh winter months. It is alarming to think that this vital assistance is being stripped away at a time when many are already grappling with rising living costs, skyrocketing energy prices, and the ongoing impacts of inflation. This decision, Mr Mayor, does not merely reflect a budgetary cut. It signifies a failure to protect those who have contributed so much to our society throughout their lives. For many pensioners, this allowance is the difference between a warm, safe home and the risk of fuel poverty, which can lead to severe health issues, social isolation, and even not being able to eat during the coldest months of the year. Whilst we are aware of the financial commitments by this government undertaking, such as union-backed public sector pay rises, the significant investments in projects like GB Energy and climate change initiatives in Africa, these expenditures must not come at the expense of our pensioners' well-being. The priority should be to safeguard the health and security of those who have built our communities and our nation. We cannot turn a blind eye to the plight of the elderly in Derby, who deserve our protection and support. The irony of cutting such an essential benefit whilst making substantial financial commitments elsewhere cannot be overlooked. Therefore, Mr Mayor, this council acts upon this motion. We will reach out to the Chancellor of the Exchequer with the help of the political leadership of this council urging the reinstatement of the winter fuel payment, emphasising the specific impact this policy will have on our pensioners in Derby. We must highlight that without this support, we risk further exacerbating the struggles of those already facing significant challenges. Moreover, should this policy remain unchanged, which is very likely, we will ensure that all affected residents are informed about the alternative benefits and support available to them. We must empower our seniors in Derby to navigate the complexities of financial age and the trying times. Mr. Mayor, let us stand together in solidarity with our pensioners. Let us advocate fiercely for their rights and well-being. It is our moral duty to protect those who have built the foundations of our society and to ensure that they are treated with the dignity and the respect they deserve. I urge you all to support this motion and to join us in calling for the reversal of this ill-conceived policy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smale. I understand, Councillor Hassel, you wish to second this. Do you want to speak now or reserve your right? I reserve my right. Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak on this motion? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. We know that sending one letter through the post, seeing one advert on the television, talking to one friend, rarely gets people to take action. And therefore, if we are going to really encourage the elderly people in Derby who qualify for pension credit to actually apply for it, we need to be more proactive. And although I haven't got an amendment, people will be pleased to know, I would encourage those with more power than me in the council to think about how we can, for example, work with our bus companies, work through social services, work within any day centres to make sure that those messages are getting across and people are talking about it so that people actually do apply for the benefits for which they qualify.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The sentiment of this motion is something I think we can all agree on. No Labour government wants to make these tough decisions and choices, but the country's finances need stabilising. It's nice that the Conservative Party have found their empathy and compassion. For some of our most vulnerable residents, they're now in opposition. I remember in May 2022, when I was sat up there, and every single Conservative sat on their hands and didn't vote for the motion relating to the socio-economic duty law, which prevents councils from making decisions that cause people to be worse off. It is important to put this into some context and how we got here. We have had 14 years of financial mess and chaos, and a £22 billion black hole that needs to be filled. Do we continue spending money we haven't got and heaping even more pressure on the NHS that's on its knees, our adult social care that is at breaking point, continue on the path of lack of social housing, food poverty, child poverty? Our child poverty in this city is 38%. And a big contributing factor to this has been caused by the two-child benefit cap, the mental health crisis, crashing the economy. How many of your residents had their mortgages doubled overnight? How many lost their homes? I could continue, and all this in the 6th richest country in the world. Quite frankly, shameful and embarrassing. Even locally, we've had to make difficult choices after the last Conservative council spent all the reserves. They were going to close Ashgate Nursery and the libraries. When we took control, we had to make difficult choices, but we believe we made the right choices to save these vital services. Let's also not forget they made cuts to the grass-cutting service and then campaigned against it when their decisions started to have consequences for the city. One quote stands out for me following those disastrous years. Their ineptitude and incompetence have led to their downfall. Well, Councillor Smale, it was not just the Conservatives' downfall, it was the country's. We can continue this path nationally and locally, or we can make difficult decisions and choices. These aren't always decisions and choices we are going to want to make. However, there are no easy options, and acting is not an option. Since the announcement several weeks ago, our MPs, I and the Labour Group have been working with officers, valuable partners and agencies across the city, and we have been proactive in working with what has been put in front of us to ensure that the most affected are supported. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has supported and worked tirelessly. It's been a real team effort. So this is proactive. This is what we've been doing, Councillor Kerr and everybody else. Increased communications via our social media platforms. Working with valuable partners and agencies to ensure those pensions that fall just outside of the threshold are also supported by initiatives through the Household Support Fund that was due to end, however, has been extended by the Labour government. Our warm hubs as well. Information is available in the Council House reception, warm hubs, cost of living webpage, GP practices and Age UK. We've ordered information and advice booklets from Age UK, which will be distributed via warm hub, local area coordinators, local community groups, places of worship, hubs, etc. I was interviewed on Radio Derby highlighting the help and support in place so far to try and reach those pensioners who aren't on social media. We have £9 million of unclaimed pension credit in Derby. £9 million. These pensioners would not only receive the winter fuel allowance, but they'd also receive an extra amount per month all year round up to the value of £3,900. Extensive research and negotiation has taken place to bring a module on board. This is a data matching tool which will identify and give us the means to target the £179 million not being claimed in this city. Phase 1 is the £9 million of pension credit. On the 4th of October, we are hosting a pension advice service, one-stop shop where pensioners can access a vast array of help, support, information and advice on benefits, mental health, fire safety, help completing pension credit applications, home warmth efficiency, speak with the DWP. We would invite all members to encourage residents in your wards to attend. Details will be released on this imminently. There is a similar initiative being piloted in Locality 4 on a smaller scale, with a view to roll it out in all localities and open to everybody. Finally, a direct mail has been drafted and is ready to be distributed to 2,400 pensioners that we have identified are in receipt of housing benefit, with information on how to apply for pension credit and an invitation to the Pension Advice Service.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers.
If you wouldn't mind, Mr Mayor, I notice we have lots of pensioners attending full council today. If there is a member of staff available to go up and just get some names, addresses, emails, phone numbers, I'll personally contact the attendees.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Chambers, could you just turn your... You have an amendment, I understand, Councillor Chambers. Can it be articulated, please?
I was going to say, it's rather...
Mr Mayor, point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yes.
I don't recall Councillor Chambers putting forward an amendment.
She didn't.
Particularly within the time that she had.
No.
This is a balls of this council.
I know.
Councillor Chambers, do you understand that? You didn't move the amendment within the 5 minutes.
Oh, she only has 5 minutes.
Does she not have any 5 minutes if she makes the amendment?
Nadine, you move it then. Please. No.
Councillor Peakfield, you need to indicate that you wish to speak, if you wish to speak on any amendment, but there are other speakers ahead of you.
Thank you. So according to my list, we've got Councillor Mulhall.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and what a shambles that was. Anyway, thank you, Mr Mayor, and it will come as no surprise to my fellow councillors that I rise to support the motion tabled by Councillor Smale and seconded by Councillor Hassel. Mr Mayor, I'm going to start by saying that I don't have political heroes. But what I do have are politicians that I admire, from all political parties, from all political colours and persuasions. Politicians with, Thatcher is though, politicians who have courage, who are principled, who have their stars to steer by. One of these politicians is Nye Bevan. For those of you who don't know your history, he is a titan of Labour politics and the man who founded the NHS. He famously said that the language of priorities is the religion of socialism. Well, it is very clear, Mr. Mayor, that the religion of this Labour government is one of bowing down and grovelling at the altar of your trade union public sector paymasters. And the language of their priorities is to hammer pensioners. Hammer those who have paid into the system all their lives. Hammer those who are lonely and vulnerable. Hammer the 35,929 pensioners across Derby who are now facing a cold and uncertain future due to the reckless, cruel and malignant government's decision to remove the winter fuel allowance. So let us be in no doubt, this is going to do serious harm to the just about managing pensioners. It will hit those who are already vulnerable and already struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. The winter fuel allowance has been a lifeline for many pensioners across our city, ensuring that they can keep their homes warm during the coldest months of the year. It is not just about comfort, it is about survival. Cold homes lead to illness and in some cases tragically death. The removal of this allowance is not simply a financial blow to our elderly residents, it puts their health and well-being at significant material risk. Labour's own research back in 2017 suggested a cut to the payment could lead to a further 4,000 deaths over winter. That number will now be significantly higher in 2024. So I ask Labour Party councillors in this chamber, are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable that your very own colleagues, Councillor Whitby and Councillor Shanker, voted for a policy that could lead to cold, shivering pensioners ending up in hospital with pneumonia or respiratory illness, putting more pressure on the NHS? This is weak and feeble politics at its very worst. I will not stand by and allow this to happen without putting up the mother of all fights. It is our duty as representatives of this city to protect our most vulnerable residents. This motion calls for the Leader of the Council and the Cabinet Member for Cost of Living to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, urging the Government to reverse this harmful decision. We should all unite and vote for this. Our message to the Government must be clear. This is going to hammer pensioners. These are people who have contributed to our society for decades, and now, in their time of need, we cannot abandon them. The 35,929 pensioners in Derby need this allowance to keep their homes warm, to stay healthy, and above all else, to maintain their dignity. I urge every councillor in this chamber to support this motion. This is about doing what's right for Derby's pensioners. It's about ensuring that no one must choose between heating their home and putting food on the table. So let us stand with our elderly residents and send a strong message to this government that Derby will always protect its people. Join with us and back this motion. My message to Labour councillors is a blunt and simple one. Back this motion or face the consequences of your actions. You've sowed the wind, now reap the whirlwind.
Thank you, Councillor. I now have Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still trying to get my head around this entire decision. I'm going to tell a nice little story. One evening, I'm in the kitchen, minding my own business, cooking away, and my partner, James, comes in and goes, Rachel Reeves has cut in winter fuel allowance for all but on pension credit. And I went, you what? I went, why? I went, I don't know, but she says, I actually thought I was being pranked by my partner. I was just, this can't be true. So I went back into the front room after I finished cooking, looked it up, and I went, why would she do this? Now, I'm not the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I know that is a really stupid decision to make. It's going to go down like a lead balloon. And it has. It is clumsy, it's ill thought out. It has not got a consensus in society. I dare say If it was tapered off as income was going up, we could probably all agree on that, because not everybody does actually need it. Now, who this is actually going to hit hardest, it doesn't take a genius to work out, it is women. Women in previous generations did not work full time. That is a fact, not like today. Some would have inherited a private pension just over the limit. There are a lot of them, literally just over. This is women. I think it's about 66% of people hit are women. Now, that is something every single one of us has actually got to live with. Somewhere around, we're going to know somebody who's hit with it. It's not just what's also happened. It's started a nasty debate off in society over who is entitled to what. I've heard it from both sides. I would repeat what one person said to me, but whoever goes editing this is going to have to stick a bunch of beeps on it. Why should this person get it? And yes, I've heard the lot. That is not healthy in society for that debate to be going off. That seriously isn't. Or somebody comes up in the supermarket and says, what are they going to do to us next? People should not be thinking like that in society. It is not good. This is a clumsy, clumsy decision, and I'm praying this government either U-turns or changes its stance at some point in the future, just to try and bring some cohesion, because I can tell in the middle, you lot don't agree with it either. So please, you could vote for this motion and you're not going to be judged elsewhere, although 2 people in principle have already voted against it. But they want to climb the greasy pole, I understand that one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Now I've got Councillor Graves next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak on the winter fuel payments motion, which I think is an excellent motion. Mr. Mayor, I note that had we supported the new constitution that was presented by this Labour Council and heavily encouraged by senior officers of this council, this motion would not even be allowed to be debated. We would have been denied by political gerrymandering to discuss the issues of the day. Clearly, the new Labour government has made some decisions that are contrary to the public views. This, in my view, is one of their big mistakes by attacking one of the biggest vulnerable groups in the country, old age pensioners. Whilst the last government was not doing a great job, this government seems hell-bent on making things even worse. The recent general election in the main really showed that people stopped voting Conservative rather than positively voting for Labour. During that election, not once did the Labour Party state that they would cut the winter fuel allowance. In fact, Keir Starmer was quoted saying that he wouldn't cut it as one of their policy ideas. Yet here we are a few months later, and this new policy has just been passed through. No thought for, as I mentioned, the biggest vulnerable group in the country, our oldest generation, people that have contributed to our society all their lives. The more you read about the Labour Party, the more you realise their twisted ideology on what makes up the majority of British people. These people once looked at you to support them. These people believed that you would be elected and help them. These people didn't vote for you to put them under threat of dying from the cold. Mr. Mayor, it's quite interesting that sat here are 2 councillors that are now members of Parliament. 2 councillors that actually voted to remove the old age pensioners' winter fuel payments, which, as we know, was a mere £300. 2 councillors that can now claim to heat their own houses all year round. 2 councillors that are double-dipping the system with an MP's allowance and a councillor's allowance. Now, I've known these councillors for a long time, and I had no doubt that Councillor Shanker would vote this through. He wouldn't want to jeopardise his political career path. However, I was more surprised at Councillor Whitby, who I believe has been taken over to the dark side. The years I have known John Whitby, he has always come across as such a nice and caring chap. And I know he struggles with my political choices, but that didn't stop him being a decent chap. Knowing that 55 Labour MPs abstained and 1 voted against this decision, I was flabbergasted that John was not one of them. So many times have we seen MPs' morals just chucked out of the window. One has to ask, what for? Now, as for the rest of the councillors, it'll be interesting to see if any of the remaining Labour councillors have sympathy with the people they represent. Are they willing to be highlighted as supporting such a mean-spirited government decision by not supporting this motion? I have heard all the stories about 22 million black hole, a much smaller black hole than was left by the last Labour government. Maybe there would be some sympathy if other less important budgets were cut, such as the massive foreign aid budget, or indeed the budget that supports illegal immigrants. There is overwhelming support across the country to cut these budgets, which would wipe the 22 billion problem with lots of change left. I was surprised at Councillor Chambers' own response is that the Tories are worse than the Labour, and she should condemn the decision by her party. It's interesting to note that all Reform MPs voted against it. I don't suppose anyone has considered the economic impact on this. Nearly 36,000 people affected by this terrible Labour government. That has taken £108 million a year out of the city economy. More if you consider the conurbations on the borders of our city that belongs to other councils. That amount overshadows the £9 million that Councillor Chambers mentioned in her speech. One issue I have, Mr. Mayor, with this motion is that we cannot guarantee that the leader or the cabinet member will carry out this resolution. They are both Labour and they will find any reason not to have to do it.
Time, Councillor Grace, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I think it's Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have an amendment to move. Yes, please.
Can we circulate
Thank
it,
you very
please?
much. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to repeat the sentiment that Councillor Chambers started her speech with in saying that nobody in this chamber disagrees in principle with the sentiment of this motion. We all feel very passionate, quite clearly, about the most vulnerable in our society. But what I will call out is hypocrisy when I see it. Councillor Chambers referenced the 2022 socio-economic duty motion, which the Conservative group refused to support. There was also the 2021 cost of living motion that I proposed, and they also did not support. And then a 2019 and 2018 two motions on universal credit, which, again, they did not support. So it seems, a little disingenuous to suddenly feel so very passionate about our most vulnerable when previously they have not shown such consideration. I will not stand by, said Councillor Mulhall. However, in 2018 to 2022, his party certainly did. I said your party did. Now, the figures in your motion are incorrect. So the first thing that this amendment does is to correct those figures. As of the House of Commons Library published figures show how many pensioners there are in Derby in receipt currently of the winter fuel allowance. So those corrections have been made. Now, so that leaves, with 11,859 pensioners in Derby on pension credit, and we are looking to address those who are not claiming it but are eligible, as Councillor Chambers said, a further £9 million, which is currently not being claimed. We are doing everything proactively and in as many different forums as possible to reach those people and inform and support and help them to claim that. Now, what that does leave, as we are all aware, is somewhat of a grey area. However, what it does not leave is the full and total number that you claim of pensioners that will be either vulnerable, suffering, or struggling without the winter fuel allowance. Indeed, there will be many pensioners who can afford to lose it, that don't use it for winter fuel, and it can be better placed being reallocated to the most needy in society. Now, the amendment absolutely still agrees to send a letter, as you've requested. However, considering that not every single pensioner across the whole country is in need of this winter fuel allowance, considering that every other benefit that people across this country are in receipt of is means tested, and many benefits throughout the previous Conservative governments have been means tested, then it only makes absolute sense that this is also means tested, so that it's not going where it isn't required or needed. And I will finally finish by referring to back to the period of October 2023, where it was numerously reported in various different news vehicles that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was considering removing the winter fuel payment scheme from all but those who are currently eligible, other than the poorest pensioners. So please don't, jump on any kind of bandwagon here to say that this is something new. It was something that the previous Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was going to implement, but was too afraid to in the end because it was just before a general election. It's the difficult decisions that have to be taken that shows responsible government. This is a difficult decision, and it's not a palatable one for any of us. However, by means testing and by actually using this letter to ask to extend the current eligibility to ensure that any people who fall between the cracks, who may fall into that grey area of just about managing, to quote a previous Prime Minister, to capture any of those people who may still struggle without the winter fuel payment. That letter that we intend to send to government will do that.
Thank you, Councillor Peatfield. Now, I understand you're seconding this, Councillor Ashby, are you? Do you want to speak now? Reserve your right.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Rawson, do you want to speak on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to raise a few points on today's amendment. I think we've talked about the fact that there are other options about being able to claim pension credits, and that's great, and we need to get that message out there to this. But I just want to reiterate the fact that I deal with a lot of pensioners at Spondon who approach our Ts, and this is a proud generation. They don't want to come with a begging bowl and a pleading bowl to say, can I have, can I have? They don't want to, they've saved all their lives, and if they've done that, then they're being penalised for doing that going forward. These people are coming to our Tea Tuesdays and sitting there because it's the only bit of warmth they get, and they're sitting there with blankets on, and they may be property rich, they may have some savings that are saving for their future in terms of their care homes and wanting to look after themselves in the future. But these aren't people that are going around spending money on fantastic, amazing cruises. There are people out there in true need. I've got pensioners that come to our eco shop at West Park School in Spondon. And I've spoken to a lady there just last week who told me how she'd had to sell some of her jewellery in order to pay her fuel bills. You know, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and that tiny little bit of support is crucial to so many residents. And I just think we're missing the point here. It isn't about who says who's most in need. What is means testing? At the end of the day, the fact that people may have put all this to the side, they're not people that want to take this from the society. They need it. And I just think we're just forgetting that in all of this motion, and I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Councillor Waha.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think anyone here would be in favor of watching people who have worked hard all their lives be left out in the cold, which is why the first thing to state is that this isn't a removal of winter fuel allowance, it's means testing. But, and I would like to remind, members opposite that, the Conservative Party has time and again tried to brand itself as a responsible party of government. Well, let's not talk about the past 14 years, but this isn't new for the party. We can talk about universal credit, we can talk about child benefit for higher earners, housing benefits, free TV license for over 75. There's precedent of saying we look at the people who most deserve this. And I do understand when you speak, Councillor, about those who do not want to, they are proud, and it's not just a uniquely British, it's a human thing, So what I would ask is to consider supporting the amendment, because we are happy to amend, this motion to show that, of course, on this side of the aisle, we do stand, as everyone in Derby, with pensioners, with those who deserve the winter fuel allowance, but we just do need to make sure that it goes to those who deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Shankar, I've got you down on my list to speak. Do you want to speak on the amendment or
the substantive?
Substantive.
I'll speak when we're back on the substantive.
Thank you, Councillor Shankar. Does anybody... Councillor Kerr.
May I ask for an adjournment for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'm happy to give an adjournment of 5 minutes. If we can have a second, please. Anybody? If everybody's okay, we'll give a 5-minute adjournment then. Councillor Kerr, after the adjournment, you wish to speak?
I'm happy to speak after the adjournment, and thank you for allowing it. Sadly, we in this chamber, the majority of us in this chamber, have very little say over what happens down in Westminster. And therefore, however we might suggest we redesign our benefit system is going to count for naught. So I guess this is why it was suggested we shouldn't even debate things like this, but they make a really big impact on our community. And therefore, I think sometimes you have to stand up and be determined to send a clear message to those in London. So in terms of the amendment, we're not going to support it.
Thank you. And there is a request from those in the gallery, if you could speak up, they are struggling to hear you. So if anybody speaks, give it plenty of vocal, thank you.
Any more speakers?
Any more speakers?
Councillor Smale.
Councillor Smale. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, the Conservative Group will also be voting against this amendment. I have some concerns around the House of Commons library figures. Obviously, we are in a much advanced position than 22-23 compared to the DWP figures that we have received. It's not our job as a council to come back with an alternative proposal. Our motion is quite simple. Return it back to central government, tell them to U-turn, and maybe come back to us with a simpler solution. I don't believe it's up to us to decide who's at risk and who's not. I think that should be done by greater work in central government. So I believe our current motion should stand, Mr Mayor, so we'll be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have to say it's disappointing that the Conservative group and in many ways and even more disappointingly that the Liberal Democrat group were not able to support the amendment. The reason I say this is that the original motion talks about a policy that has already been enacted in Parliament. So changing that policy, which has been debated fully in Parliament, and arguments for and against put, and the position that Councillor Chambers and Councillor Peatfield put forward in terms of what is being done to mitigate and to promote and prioritise those in greatest need in this city. What has already been done and what will be done is the best way forward, a constructive way forward in terms of tackling the issues that are faced nationally about budget shortfalls, trashing of the economy, and the situation we find ourselves where we are having to make decisions about whether we have universal benefits or we have means-tested benefits. And as Councillor Anwar highlighted earlier, there are many benefits. The majority of benefits are, unfortunately these days, means-tested because they're prioritising and targeting those in most need. I did hear earlier the 22 million black hole being identified as not all of the doing of the previous government. Unfortunately, it all was. And I've heard it today, and I've heard it in the chamber previously and outside this, that 11 million was due to the current government awarding pay increases. The reality is the previous government was irresponsible in hiding their head in the sand where there were recommendations from the remuneration boards of various organisations which said recommending increase in pay. That should have been dealt with and should have been budgeted for by the previous Conservative government. It was not. So hard decisions have had to be made, but we are already doing, and as Councillor Chambers said, as the portfolio lead, what we will add to do to make sure that those most in need are helped in all the ways that have already been identified, plus we will reach out to those who are not claiming pension credit in the City of Derby. That's the right thing to do. This amendment is the right amendment to make sure we not only take account of the budget shortfall and gaps that exist, but also to make sure that we look after our vulnerable communities and our pensioners in particular in this particular situation for their needs and make sure that we do the best we can for them. So I'm disappointed. I still invite the Liberal Democrat group or some members of the group to support this amendment because it's the right way forward and it's more realistic and more with the situation we face ourselves now, not what was the situation a couple of months ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Is anybody else wanting to speak, or shall I go to the seconder, Councillor Ashby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Chambers. I've been really encouraged to hear all that you and your team have been doing to seek to reach out and to find all of the pensioners in this city who are not already receiving what they're entitled to. So please pass on thanks to the team for that, because that is really encouraging. Well, what can I say? I support the amendment because, as everybody here has said, you know, it breaks our hearts to think that cuts have to be made to any benefit that has been given out. But in line with others here, we will lose £600 in our household in this coming winter. But I'm not going to turn off the heating because of it, and I'm not going to go hungry because of it. And I am certain, it is a fact, that we are by no means anywhere near amongst the wealthiest pensioners in Derby. There are many other pensioners in Derby who will be in the same situation as ourselves and who will not be going cold or hungry because they're going to lose the winter fuel payment. It is disingenuous, therefore, of Councillor Smale and Councillor Graves and any other councillors who've spoken as if every single pensioner in Derby is going to suffer as a consequence of this, because some of you have spoken as if that is the case. It is not the case. And the reason I am supporting and seconding this amendment is precisely because not every pensioner in Derby or every pensioner in the country is going to suffer. There will be some. And we all know that in every means-tested benefit, the people who are in danger of suffering are the people on the borders, those in the grey area who are not on pension credit, but who are just about coping and will be managing to cope better this winter with the winter fuel payment. And for that reason, I will support and second this motion, because we want to be mindful that there will always be a cohort when any benefit is means tested of those who are not entitled to the benefit but who are very close to being entitled to it. Councillor Smale, you said it's not our job to decide who is in need. And that's, oh sorry, maybe it wasn't you. One of you said it was not the job of this council to decide who was in need of benefits. If that's the case, why are we discussing this motion at all? Why was this motion brought? If it's not our job and if it's not worthy of discussion, then we shouldn't have this motion being put forward at all. But it is worthy of discussion because it's something we all feel passionate and concerned about. And therefore, I recommend the amendment to the motion because it is a measured, a thoughtful amendment. It is recognising that whatever people think about past governments and current governments, there's a black hole. We don't need to start slinging any further mud about the black hole. It's there. It needs addressing. Books need balancing. Ways need to be found, and will have to continue to be found to balance it, like we all have to do in our own housekeeping. So it's unfortunate that this has had to be done, but it's only having to be done because when the winter fuel payment was brought in originally, it was brought in as a payment without any constraints, and it's not something that can be afforded as a blanket payment across the country, obviously. Therefore, I support the amendment, and I would encourage everybody to reconsider your stances and support it.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. So I'm going to move to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Nobody's standing up. So all those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against? The amendment falls. And now back to the substantive.
Councillor Shanker actually first.
Yes. Councillor Shanker, you're first, then Councillor Whitby.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope you're well, and I hope the Mayoress is well also. And I was wondering if she's reflected on our last telephone conversation, and you could maybe give me an update at some stage. It's not been a good night. I think it's embarrassing and shameful. They have not delivered on what they said they would. I think I've been betrayed. It is nothing short of what the party deserves. Voters have clearly given us a good kicking. The words of the proposer of this motion, Councillor Smale. And what we've got to ask is, why did voters give you and your party a good kicking? It's because you absolutely ruined our economy. After 14 years of Conservative government, the economy and the country broken in any and every aspect, making huge commitments that you couldn't afford and deliver on. Huge commitments like 40 new hospitals. Remember those 3 words? The problem is 40, the number was wrong. New. Most of them weren't new. Hospitals. They weren't even hospitals. A £22 billion in-year black hole left in the country's finances. Absolutely disgusting. And that's why, if anyone's asking or wondering, why former MP for Derby North, Amanda Soloway, is sat up in the public gallery, that's exactly why she sat there. The new government, with a huge mandate from the public, first line of a manifesto supported by the public. First step, first line, deliver economic stability. And that economic stability only comes with tough spending rules, so we can grow the economy and keep taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. You'll also remember, currently, the tax burden is the highest in 70 years. So we do want to support pensioners, but it's got to be on good fiscal terms so everybody in the country is supported. You remember child benefit was means tested in 2010. The Liberal Democrats, and I believe Reform, but I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, in their manifestos and in previous years have made commitments to means test the winter fuel allowance. So I'm not sure why there's such an outrage from those benches there. Tough choices and tough decisions are needed, and they must be made. With your permission, Mr Mayor, let's have a little bit of audience participation. Officers don't need to join in, but I'd be glad if members would. Who, members-wise, raise your hand if you can remember Liz Truss. Can we just have a show of hands?
Councillor
Right.
Shanker, can
Brilliant.
you... Councillor
Some over there don't
Shanker.
even remember.
Councillor Shanker.
All right.
Councillor Shanker.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Can you stick to the point.
Absolutely sticking to the point.
Not go off at tangents.
Absolutely
We don't want to hear about other prime ministers, etc. We want to stick to this.
It's okay. Hypocrisy again. Hypocrisy again, Mr. Mayor, and why am I not surprised? You're allowed it for them to mention prime ministers, and I now can't mention prime ministers and former prime ministers. So let me ask again, and I'm surprised that they can't remember a former prime minister, and or they're too embarrassed to remember this former prime minister who crashed the economy, who within 6 weeks of being the prime minister left
Councillor
everybody.
Shanker, I'm going to ask you if you know CP 46. Speeches must be directed to the question under discussion.
It is. It
or to a personal explanation. It's not.
It absolutely is. And again, Mr. Mayor, the guarantee to protect the triple lock is another manifesto commitment which is being implemented and will be implemented in full. And it's tough decisions that are needed. Like I said, the Liberal Democrats, and I believe Reform, and the Tories have touched on it before, winter fuel allowance, they have all agreed should be means tested. It's not being scrapped, it's going to be means tested. The most vulnerable in society will be protected. But the triple lock has given pensioners this year a £900 increase. The figures out just last week suggest next year's increase will be around £400. By the end of this Parliament, every pensioner will be around £1,700 a year, every year, better off than they are now. And it's sound, tough policies around the country's finances that are needed to be made to ensure them commitments can be kept.
Thank you, Councillor Shanker.
Thank you. I've watched aghast since the election as the Labour Party have taken the really tough choice to dramatically increase spending in areas such as public sector pay, particularly to people like parliamentary special advisers who can now earn more than the Prime Minister and the union members that supported their election campaign.
Mr. Mayor, is that related to the motion?
Yes. The pensioners, many of which voted them into power, have seen no such benefits, with fuel prices rising and fuel payments removed. While the winter fuel allowance is a blunt instrument, very flawed in its conception and delivery, the reduction in income to the poorest in our society is a very tough pill to swallow and will surely cost lives. A real plan to resolve pensioner poverty would be welcome and is very much required. The state pension is not a benefit and should not require topping up just to make life viable. It is something that all pensioners have paid into all their lives and should cover life expenses in retirement instead of leaving people in desperate need looking for handouts. None should be means tested and nobody should require a credit. When implemented, such a plan could well justify the fuel payments removal. But until such time, this is a lifesaver and should remain in place. Derby citizens need better, deserve better, and will really struggle this year due to this disgraceful decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser. Councillor Whitby, I understand you want to speak.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to add some, reality and some context to this. My honourable friend has already mentioned some of these points, but I just want to say that, listen, nobody wanted to make this decision, 100%. And nobody expected to make the decision because nobody knew the full scale of the problem. It is 22 billion in year, Mr. Mayor, and some of the issues that were discovered, and the OBR now has accepted these things weren't recognised before the election, were the 6.4 billion overspend on asylum / Rwanda, the 1.6 billion overspend on transport. There wasn't enough money in the reserve to provide the military aid to Ukraine that the whole House has supported, so that needs to be found and honoured. The reserve was overspent 3 times in just 3 months, the first 3 months of this year, Mr. Mayor. And going back to this GB News / Daily Mail talking point of, oh, we've given the public sector a pay rise, one of the reasons why we had such a huge victory, 412 MPs, Mr. Mayor, that's pretty significant. One of the reasons why we were voted in is because our public services are on their knees. Everyone accepts this, even the Tories accept it. And if we don't pay our public services, then they can't ever recruit and they can't retain, and they'll remain on their knees. So we have to pay them. And going back to Councillor Dinser's point about the pay review bodies, the last government didn't even make a suggestion on how much money the state could afford. So when they came back with, oh, they should get X, well, the current government has just accepted that. There was no previous direction from the past government. I tell you what, if this government was a council, they'd have given in the Section 114, they'd have the commissioners in, and the commissioners would have means-tested winter fuel allowance. Thank you.
Councillor Matt Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. 11,797. It's my understanding that's how many pensioners in Derby South are losing their winter fuel payments. And Councillor Shanker seems proud of justifying this clumsy and unnecessary cut made by the Labour government. It'd have been better for you to stay in Westminster tonight. You should be ashamed, Councillor Shanker. You should be ashamed.
Councillor Matters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've really ummed and ahed about whether to speak in this particular debate. Some bits of what I wanted to say have been covered by my party colleagues, but I feel motivated to for 2 reasons. The first is I credit Labour councillors with not actually attempting to defend the policy, just attempting to use whataboutism without saying the word what about. And it felt hard to do that. I've never heard so many times people attempting to change the subject to someone else's perceived wrongdoings to imply that regardless of context, every action shares a moral equivalency, and since no one's perfect, all criticism is hypocritical. That's what all of you that have spoken have done so far, attempt to say, what about other things that negate what we've actually done? That's all that's gone on so far. You've not really sought to defend it. And I get that, because it's not really defensible, and you call it means testing, I call it just plain mean. So let's bring it back to people. So I met somebody who I was on a walkabout the other day. I'm not sure if he was an Oakwood Ward resident or somebody from Chaddesden, but he recognised who I was. And I was having a talk with them about the winter fuel payments cut. This was actually before the vote was held. And I've got 3 grandparents affected by this, but it was the words this person said to me that stick with me more than anything, and probably will for the time that I'm a councillor. The person said to me, I hope I die before winter starts. It will be less painful that way. That is the human reality of the decision we're making today. But if I bump into him, Councillor Ashby, I'll be sure to tell him you're nice and warm. And Councillor Shanker, I'll be sure to say if he does make it through the winter... You beat me to it. That's exactly what I'm doing, exactly what I'm doing. And Councillor Shanker, I'll be sure to let them know that if he does make it through the winter, there might be a bit of money in it next year for them. That is the human reality. Wherever we trade politics, that's the human reality of this decision today.
Councillor Ashby,
I never
you've
wanted
had your
to
chance.
I know it's hard to hear, Councillor Ashby, but it's true. That is the human cost and reality of the decision that has been made, that we are asking the government to reverse. It's a decision between pensioners having just that extra little bit of money to pay the heating bills and pensioners freezing. I know what side of the debate I want to be on. I'm supporting the motion. I hope everybody will.
Thank you, Councillor Hare. If there's nobody else wishing to speak, I'm going to move to the seconder, Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We gather today at a crossroads where the character of our government and the welfare of our people stand in stark contrast. The Labour government, in its first act as the new custodians of this great country, has laid bare its priorities. And what are they? Bowing to union pay rises that deliver no additional service value, the early release of prisoners, making our streets and communities unsafe, and most astonishingly, the removal of the winter fuel allowance that Councillor Shanker has voted for. Let me speak plainly. This is not the conduct of a government that understands the people it serves. This is not the behaviour of those entrusted with the protection and welfare of its elderly. They may speak of fairness, they may shout about equality, but in this moment, when the chill of winter is about to descend upon us, their actions reveal a bitter indifference to the cold reality faced by millions of our pensioners. For many, the winter fuel allowance is not some lavish benefit handed out carelessly. It is a lifeline, a bulwark against the cold, and is an enabler of both heating and eating rather than choosing one or the other, for the elderly, the infirm, and those who have served this nation through decades of toil and sacrifice. This vindictive Labour government has clearly demonstrated what its priorities are in rushing to reward its union backers, to leave into our borders unchecked and open to abuse from people smuggling gangs, in essence leaving a blank cheque at the port of Dover while choosing to snatch vital support from the hands of those who really need it.
Councillor Hassel, I've been quite lenient with a lot of people tonight. Okay, so let the seconder just have his say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What manner of priority is this? What twisted logic elevates the pay packets of the few to the warmth and survival of the many? What mind decides that criminals should walk free while our elderly should shiver in the cold? This is not a government driven by the well-being of the people. It is driven by a misguided agenda that values politics over people, ideology over common sense. And let us not forget, this is one of their first actions as a government. And if this is the opening chapter of their administration, one shudders to think what comes next. Let us be clear, a government that forsakes its duty to protect its most vulnerable citizens is a government that has already lost its way. We owe it to the generations who have come before us, to those who have weathered wars, economic crises and the daily struggles of life to ensure that their twilight years are not spent in darkness and cold. It is no small thing to turn off the heat in homes where warmth is not a luxury but a necessity. Yet this is the path the Labour government has chosen, blinded, it seems, by their own narrow priorities. I say to them, do not be so quick to reward the few at the expense of the many. Do not make the mistake that this moment of political power is a mandate to ignore the very people who gave you that power. In this winter that looms ahead, we must not abandon those who face the hardest days. The fabric of our society is not tested in times of comfort, but in times of hardship. And in this moment, the Labour government has shown its hand. It is willing to sacrifice the well-being of our elderly for the sake of their political allies. But we, the people of Derby, must not stand idly by. We must raise our voices in defence of those who cannot afford to be forgotten. We must remind this government, in the words of our forefathers, that the strength of a nation is measured not in the wealth it hoards, but by the care it shows to the weakest among us. So I say to you all...
Councillor Hassel, just stop. If you wish to speak, will you put your hand up, please, and do it properly with a bit of etiquette? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I say to you all, stand firm, stand resolute. Let us oppose this unjust measure with all the vigour we possess. For if we fail to protect those who are most vulnerable, we fail as a nation. And I, for one, will not see Britain fail at the hands of this hopeless, clueless and careless Labour government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I will now move to the vote. All those for the motion...
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think everything's been well said by a passionate debate by everyone. I don't mean to drag on any further, Mr. Mayor. I think we should go to the vote. And can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
Thank you. A recorded vote then, please.
Yeah, you've got your 10.
All those in favour of the motion?
Craig will went through it. Ready? You read out names, Craig.
So I'll read out names in alphabetical order. If you can indicate whether you are for, against or abstaining on the motion, please. Councillor Amon. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Atwell.
For.
Councillor Bolton. So we can say that again, Councillor Bolton. Sorry, it was just... It's big, sorry. Yeah, and then
Apologies, just bear with us one moment. It's the first time we've done this without Alex for some time.
Councillor Bonza. Councillor Kerr. Councillor Chambers. Councillor Deninza. Councillor Evans. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Folk. Councillor Graves. Councillor Hassel. Councillor Heselgrave. Councillor Holmes. A. Holmes, sorry. Councillor M. Holmes. Councillor Hudson. Councillor Ingle. Present. Councillor Kaur. Councillor J. Khan. Councillor S. Khan. Councillor Kozlowski. Councillor Kuss. Councillor Lakin. Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Lonsdale. Councillor Martin. Sorry. Councillor Morgan McKeegan. Sorry. Councillor Mulhall. Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Anwar.
Councillor Waha.
Apologies, are you a pint as well? Councillor Patterson.
Way up.
Councillor Pearce. Councillor Peatfield. Councillor Poulter. Councillor Prosser. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Repton. Councillor Ralston. Councillor Sandhu. Councillor Shanker. Councillor Smale. Councillor Swan. Councillor Truella. Councillor Whitby. Councillor Wilson. Councillor C. Wright. Councillor J. Wright. And Councillor Potter. So that's 24 for the motion and none against. The rest
Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. And now we move on to item 13, which is 1984, the anti-Sikh riots. Now, it is noted it was moved by Councillor Atwell, seconded by Councillor Lonsdale. Councillor Atwell has informed us of his intention to alter the motion. This requires the consent of the meeting under CP 53 and will be signalled without debate. Councillor Atwell, do you want to explain the alteration? Can we be circulated then and put up on the screen?
Mr Mayor, can I just check? Are we getting an explanation of the alteration?
Councillor Atwell will speak to the amendment.
Councillor Atwell will speak on the amendment. Is that correct, Councillor Atwell?
We'll put it on the screen as well.
Councillor Atwell, would you like to move the motion, please?
Yes, move as printed, please.
So we're going to have a vote on the consent of the alteration of the motion. All those in favour?
May I just ask a question? I don't really feel qualified to understand this well enough. I would beg that you give us just 5 minutes so that I can consult with my Sikh colleagues on this adjustment.
Do you want a 5-minute adjournment? Certainly. Okay, another adjournment, ladies and gentlemen, 5 minutes. Okay then, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the alteration, please vote. Are you voting for the alteration to allow it?
All those in favour of the alteration? Yes, that's carried.
Councillor Atwell, do you want to move the motion as it is now, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 1984, anti-Sikh pogroms took place. 1984 in the Punjab was a time of rising political tensions. This centred around the question of how much autonomy the state of Punjab should have. Opinions were spread across the spectrum but deeply held. Most people in the UK only became aware of this issue when they heard in the news media in early June 1984 that the Indian Army was attacking the Golden Temple in Amritsar, Operation Blue Star. The aim was to remove Sikhs who wanted to see an independent state of Punjab. After 10 days, the battle was over, with many dead. Many Sikhs, men, women and children dead. Action also took place at many other Sikh temples across Punjab. People suspected of holding separatist views were rounded up and taken into custody. There are so many accounts of the inhumane treatment meted out to them. Some disappeared but not seen alive, even to this day. Around the world, the Sikh diaspora organised public protests against the military action at the Golden Temple, which is the most holy site within the Sikh religion. They were not only angry but deeply shocked that the Golden Temple complex lay in ruins. As a result of the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the end of October 1984, tensions boiled over into violence against Sikhs. Angry mobs went on the rampages through districts in Delhi, where Sikhs lived, and in Punjab. While some people sunk to the depths of vile behaviour, others took action to save the lives of Sikhs by hiding them. Given the current Prime Minister and Home Minister has announced that this was a planned violent attack on all Sikhs in 1984. 40 years after these events took place, there are still people who live with consequences today. Those who were widowed, deprived of their fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. There are residents of our city who lost relatives and who witnessed horrific things. It will mean a lot to them that their city councillors acknowledge the pain and suffering they have gone through and are going through and will never get over in their entire life. May they find peace and healing in the future, as really one can't understand what the pain and suffering they must have gone through even 40 years to this day. This is nothing political about this motion, Mr. Mayor. I would ask all councillors to join me in voting for this motion to recognise the situation a lot of Sikhs of Derby were put in 40 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lonsdale, are you still willing to second this motion, and do you want to reserve your right? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a counter amendment that we think would be more suitable for everyone. Can we hand that out, please?
Certainly circulate it. Hello, are we all ready for Councillor Cole to continue? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of you may be unfamiliar with the topic of the attack against Sikhs in 1984 in India. I realise it's not a topic that comes up in the history books and the school books, so people might be a little bit unfamiliar. I wasn't alive in 1984. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. but all my life, and I think many Sikh young people will feel the same, we've been taught and we've heard the stories about what happened during the attack, especially from the survivors. The original motion, I'm not too sure about how far it goes. I would argue it doesn't go far enough. There are elements that are left out, and there's no real action, which is why I'd like to move the amendment, please. A bit about Sikhs in the UK. I mean, we all know that Sikhs were a huge part in the British World Wars. They made up huge parts of the army. We're a minority in India. We make up less than 2% of the population. But we made up nearly half of the military that contributed. I mean, I think it's 50 years now that Sikhs have been in Derby, and the contributions are endless, and we know about them. The key thing I wanted to mention that isn't mentioned in the original motion is about Punjab and Punjabis. So Punjab is a state in India. The thing about the council recognising the attack in 1984 in the Darbar Sahib complex. So that is the Golden Temple, sometimes it's known as, in the history books. That was attacked in June of 1984, and it hasn't been recognised by any council in the UK. Every year, Sikhs get together to commemorate that and to remember the lives that were lost, to remember the survivors, the victims. The number of casualties is unknown. We don't know how many people lost their lives. There are many people that are still waiting for their loved ones to come home. Many were missing, many deaths weren't recorded. So it's really important that we as a council acknowledge that part. I'm very proud to be a British Sikh. My mother's great uncle was a recipient of the Victoria Cross for his efforts in the war. And it would, I think, mean a lot to the Punjabi community and to the Sikh community and to the Indian community in Derby if we were all to support this amendment and to support the motion. The events that took place in June are very important, as well as the events that took place in November. You'll notice that we've changed the title to read 1984 Attacks on Sikhs. Many Sikhs since 1984 have, I would argue some have taken offence, and others have said it's inappropriate to call these attacks riots, because it was a very one-sided attack on a specific community. And you know, many people are still they're seeing the results of that. Businesses were lost, homes were lost, lives were lost, and a culture of generational trauma has been passed down. Not just in people that saw what happened, but people that were away from home, so people that had moved to other countries, the diaspora, and you know, they didn't know what was going on. Communication isn't what it's like today. So it's really important for us to remember that. Another key part I'd just like to mention about the attack in June at the Darbar Sahib complex, so the Golden Temple, is the Sikh Reference Library was burnt down. Now, the Sikh Reference Library housed many, many important historical artifacts and scripts that are just irreplaceable to Sikh history. It's the kind of thing someone like myself as a history student would want to be studying today, but unfortunately those things don't exist. So that's a really key point. So our last point is that we've, on our amendment, is to call upon the leader to write to the Deputy Prime Minister. So it's often known that the attack in June was a planned attack, and we'd like to get a timeline on when the inquiry that has been promised will take place on what Britain's role was. And I think that's important to a lot of British Sikhs to get answers as to why that happened. So I hope that's a very brief overview summary, and that explains some of the issues that people might not be aware of. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gore. Is your amendment seconded? Councillor Sandhu, do you want to speak now? Reserve your right. Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's good that Councillor Gurkiran Kaur has given a background to this as a context for those councillors in this chamber who may not have followed some of the events, some of the atrocious events that happened in India. And the community living in Derby City and right across other parts in the UK, the Sikhs, Punjabis and Indians were horrified at what happened and has been described by Councillor Wilkin Kaur in the Punjab and to the Golden Temple complex. And the significant events are an attack on the holiest of sites in the Sikh psyche, religion, and history, and then the subsequent murder and continued loss of attacks on Gurdwaras right across India, and thousands and thousands who died and perished. That will never be forgotten by Sikhs and Punjabis living in India, but also in the UK and particularly in Derby. And we have a significant Sikh community, Punjabi community in Derby. And I think commemorating what happened 40 years ago and this amendment by Councillor Kaur enhances and emphasises, as she quite eloquently put, the full extent of what was experienced and what needs to be remembered by the people of Derby on behalf of a significant community in this city, and to commemorate that, but not all that, but also have something which can be progressed with the current government to see how we can actually support and recognise what has happened 40 years ago, but also to do something which is in their power to do so. So I think this amendment is something that makes the message for Sikhs, for Punjabis, for Indians, for the citizens of Derby as a whole, that people who are vulnerable and targeted should not be forgotten when they have been murdered and have died needlessly and when they should have not have done. So I urge those who have followed Sikh history, but those who have heard the background and the context to this, to vote to support this amendment, to support our communities from the Sikh Punjabi community in Derby and recognise this atrocious event that happened. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Anybody else want to speak? Else it's to Councillor Sandhu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My colleagues, Councillor Kaur and Councillor Dinser, explained what happened in '84. There is history, what happened actually, why it happened. The motion was brought for only November 1984, but it started in June, 1st of June 1984. The attack on Harmandir Sahib, we call Harmandir Sahib, which in English we say Golden Temple. There, actually foundation stone for trouble in Punjab in 1984 across India. 1st of June till 7th of June, there were thousand people were killed in Harmandir Sahib, in Golden Temple. And there was one case, there was a 1-month-old boy, and he got hit with a bullet, and he was holding his mother was holding, bullet went to mom, and they both died there. That's 1 month old. This is what happened. That's why they all the trouble. We're saying November. It's not November, just November. It started in June 1984. Because that attack in 1984, that's what happened in November. Indira Gandhi got killed, and it planned attack on Sikhs in New Delhi, across the country, India, Calcutta, Lucknow, all over India. There was 10,000 people killed, and we still haven't got how many right figures, how many people were killed, and how many girls were raped. Young girls, 10 years old, 9 years old, were raped, and people were killed, live was they live, putting ties on their necks, put a fire on. And there's videos, there's loads of videos. If anybody wants to search, go on Google. It's about torture to Sikh community. But those two attacks impacted not just only Sikhs, impacted on Punjabis, impacted on Indians, all the communities been suffering since then. And that's why we want to ask government, ask the Deputy Prime Minister. She promised in an election, before election, they will make inquiry, and what role the British government played on that, why they played it. And the most valuable thing in the library was there was script which can't be replaced, and literature. She already mentioned it, and we can't replace that. That was history of the Sikhs. That was burnt down. So I urge everyone, support this amendment, and ask Councillor Atwell as well, please support this amendment, and it's a long overdue. So ask our leader to write to Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's no more speakers, we'll move to the vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Councillor Cole, thank you for your contribution. I will accept that gracefully because it does add more meat on the bone, and I would urge the Leader of this House to write to the Deputy Prime Minister because obviously there are answers that need answering. Also yourself, Councillor Deanster and Councillor Sandra, I thank you for your kind words because it is a very subtle subject. It's been going on far too long. We're never going to recover from this. Neither will families who have loved loved ones. All we can do is give them a bit of hope that we are on their side. We do appreciate what happened was wrong and try and move forward and give them justice as best as possible. So yes, I will go with the amendment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. So all those in favour for the amendment, please show.
It wasn't everyone.
Thank you. The amendment's passed. Thank you. Now refer to the substantive motion, and does anybody want to speak, or can we vote on the...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Sikhs in our city are a well-respected part of our community. They are upstanding and honourable and have contributed to the wealth of our city. Tragic events are always sad, and this one is no different. The aftermath always proves to cause more pain and suffering. I have just come back from Rwanda, where members may recall of the Hutu-Tutsi conflict, another horrific event. Yet their people are encouraged to understand their history to help them move on. I see this motion seeks to do that, and so I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Councillor Longstaff, do you want to speak now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Carr, for your amendment. That really does help the motion to really have proper impact, so well done. When I was asked to second this motion, I was so honoured. I mean, Councillor Atwell approached me and I said, well, why do you want me to second this motion? You know, I'm a white Christian lady who wasn't around. Well, I was 2 years old when this tragedy happened in India, but I wasn't really around, let's face it, at 2. You don't know what's going on. And, you know, Councillor Atwell said, no, because it needs to be across communities. This needs to be a motion of support and healing across communities, not just the communities involved in this awful event, which, you know, I just cannot even imagine how awful, but the communities around those communities. We all need to be supporting each other and showing each other love and helping each other grow and be together as human people,
because that's what we all are. Everyone in this chamber is a mum, a dad, a brother, a sister, an auntie, an uncle, a child of somebody. And everybody who lost their lives over that year, because it lasted a long time, as was rightly pointed out, was one of those people. And we're all human, so we all need to live together. I believe this motion encourages that attitude amongst us as councillors and from this institution as a council, but also into the communities that we represent. We should be encouraging collaboration and growing together as, you know, as the family of humans that we all are. So I support this motion. Please, everybody else, do so too.
Thank you, Councillor. Move to the vote on the amended motion. All in favour, please show. That's carried, thank you. And now we move on.
Mayor, can I just make a quick point of order? I think it's CP 46. Just very quickly, if I can. The motion that we just discussed and debated pertained to something that a number of speakers mentioned not everybody in this chamber may know a lot about. It's just really for future motions that are on aspects of history that we should know more of but perhaps don't. It might aid other members if proposers, seconders or others could share some links or other information to assist other members in researching this. The only reason I mention is I've just, while here, Googled the original title of the motion and the new title of the motion, and it took me to events in October and November of that year, which on reading of them are very clearly different to events that happened in June of that year. Just for future motions that come forward, that might be something that assists all members.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's
Mr Mayor, just for clarification, it's just 40 years, whether it's June or October is irrelevant. It's 40 years to the date. Thank you. Just for clarification.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah. And now we go on to item 14, Armed Forces Community Covenant, to be moved by Councillor John Wright.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this motion is to reaffirm this council's commitment to our Armed Forces Covenant, something that we should be able to work together to fulfil. It will require a joint effort, not just within the council, but with partners such as the NHS and the government. The daily vigilance and regular deployment of our armed forces is the backbone of our international security strategy, and we should ensure we do all we can to support the efforts of our service personnel and our veterans. We do have an armed forces strategy. This was last updated in March 2019, and I think we will all agree that the world has become more dangerous. So now is a good time to rethink our approach. We have an Armed Forces champion too in Councillor Alan Lindsay, who is doing a great job but needs more support, both from the Council, our partners and the government. We would like to start with a few straightforward and pragmatic issues. First, and most importantly, there should be a presumption that the armed forces and veterans are a priority for support. So, for example, in planning policy, ask the questions, can veterans be better supported through the implementation of this policy? This could include a change to the report format so that armed forces and veterans are included as subheading like other council priorities, or the champion is consulted prior to decision making. Secondly, the Council sets up a partnership board to consider what more can be done and includes representatives of relevant Council departments and other agencies such as the NHS. This board should identify priority issues with the assistance of the Champions Advocacy. It would then develop a delivery plan and responsible for its outcomes. Thirdly, the leader should write to the Prime Minister to strongly advocate for the reinstatement of the Minister of State for Veteran Affairs. This motion and its subsequent activity would go some way to provide both material support and appreciation for our armed forces and veterans. I've tried to consider what there could be to object to in this motion and cannot envisage why members would not want to support it, hopefully suggest how it could be enhanced or how Cabinet members could weave it into their policy deliberations. I therefore commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Lindsay, you are the seconder of this motion. Do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right, thank you, Mayor.
Does anybody else want to speak on this motion? Councillor Swan.
Yeah, thank you for that intro. Yeah, I think veterans, across our communities are often the unforgotten heroes. I visited a resident only last week who was an ex-veteran, and the only reason why I visited him was because 6 months before I knocked on his door and had seen a clear and remarked difference in his health. So I made a note to go back, and I went back to see this ex-veteran, only to find that he does actually go to some of the local support services, but there were certainly, from my point of view, a lack of awareness in terms of what this person needed. This person needed a full health and social care review. This person needed some direct support. So if this goes anywhere near not only recognising but actually supporting, then I'm actually for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so I think we all know our armed forces veterans. They give their lives, they give their all to protect us, and despite many initiatives being in place, the armed covenants in particular, that's been mentioned in this motion. I know from my experience as a probation officer and manager in the probation service 30 years, I know when I was the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, when we commissioned support for victims and people with mental health and homelessness needs, and as a Police and Crime Commissioner. And we know from the work of the Council here that veterans are often very badly affected by their service. Mental health, employment is not easy to sustain, and often they fall through the net. Their representation in our criminal justice system and in our prison institutions is disproportionate to their number. So we need to do whatever we can to build on the many initiatives that have been recognised in this resolution, in this motion, that already exist. And we need to do whatever we can to join them up and to make sure that we review those initiatives to make sure we are maximising the identification, the support, and then the sort of rehabilitating those who are fallen through the net into employment and accommodation and self-worth. So for those reasons, I think it's really important that we revisit, re-emphasise and refocus our efforts to make sure that armed forces veterans are supported as fully as possible and recognised for the contribution they've made to protect us and in our community and society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Anybody else want to speak?
Councillor Graves indicated previously.
Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this is a welcome motion from Councillors Wright and Lindsay. Much is talked about enhancing and protecting those that have fought for us and our country, yet most of the time lip service is paid to it. I think it was a great day when Councillor Lindsay became the Council's Armed Forces champion. I believe he is the first to move this position forward in such a positive way. Councillor Wright mentioned the Mayor's Cadets, which had been left floundering prior to Alan's appointment. Cadets are our future veterans, and they need to know we all appreciate them. Since COVID, a lot of emphasis has been placed on mental health, yet we seem to have overlooked that veterans have suffered mental health issues ever since Britain had an army. This motion goes a long way to refocusing our energies as a country and as a city on the people that have placed their lives on the line for us. We should honour that and ensure that they get the treatment they deserve. I commend Councillor Wright and Councillor Lindsay on this motion and fully support the resolutions.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I've got Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion. I'm very happy to do so. I'm just sharing a point of information, which I'm sure you'll all be glad to know, but that already in the NHS, veterans are prioritised. Certainly within general practice, you get a flash up, a flag, when you have a patient booked in with you who is a veteran. There is a fast-track system for referring veterans onward for any further referrals they need, including to mental health. So I'm simply sharing that because I thought you would all appreciate knowing that, in fact, veterans are recognised, appreciated and given priority within the NHS.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Agitatwal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this motion by Councillor Wright and Councillor Lindsay. I mean, as you know ourselves, we've been to many dues where the cadets have turned up in the Mayor's Parlour and they are appreciative of what we are trying to do for them. Like Councillor Graves has said, today's cadets are going to be tomorrow's veterans. I think sometimes veterans do get left to one side and we don't recognise the sacrifices they've made for this country. So I have no hesitation in supporting this motion. I'd like to thank both the councillors for bringing this motion to the Chamber. It's a common sense motion. I think we need to do a little bit more to recognise what they've done for us. Just give them a little back for the years of service they've given us. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Totally agree. If nobody else wants to speak, I'm going to the seconder. Councillor Lindsay, do you want to second?
I'll second it. Thank you.
Right, we'll move to the motion then. In support of the motion... Oh, yes. But it doesn't want it somewhat. Right, can we vote for the motion then? All those in favour?
Unanimous, thank you.
Unanimous. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Item 16, support for the care experienced people. Moved by Councillor Hessel-Graves, seconded by Councillor Mulhall. It's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, on the night of the count back in May 23, when you were elected, on becoming a councillor, you also became corporate parents. You have a good idea what that means, as we all had training on this again this civic year. In the case of both you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, specific references made to this role in your oath of office, and you swore to effectively be champions for all our children in care and those who have left our care up to the age of 25. But of course, councillors, we're all champions of our children who are looked after. It's inseparable from the role. This motion has been tabled at the unanimous wish of councillors on the Corporate Parenting Committee, of which I am Vice Chair and our seconder, Councillor Mulhall, is now Chair. The motion came to our attention in a report from our Children in Care Council, which has been named Our Voice, Our Success by the young people who attend. Unless we have been in care, we cannot imagine what anyone is or has been in that situation has experienced and carries with them in their daily lives, often for many years after leaving care. It is this inability to fully grasp or understand the deep impact this has on anyone, which can lead to unconscious bias on the part of people who deal with care leavers in particular. And remember, children are placed in care through no fault of their own. People think it's our fault we are in care and have done something bad or wrong, is a comment made and echoed by others during this discussion on this at Our Voice, Our Success. Other common views expressed and supported at the meeting were, being in care shouldn't make a difference, but there's always a negative reaction and we are treated differently for being in care. Another one said, it was agreed that the negative label of being in care means that other people's perceptions of us are bad. One person just said, agree with care experience being a protected characteristic as it means we can be treated the same. Adults shouldn't treat all children in care as the same as we are all different, said another. It was widely agreed that people who haven't been in care don't have a clue or understand. And the final comment I noticed, we should be able to have the same opportunities as everyone else. Our Voice, Our Success strongly wishes that should this motion be carried, it will lead to a better understanding among those in the Council who have dealings with care experienced people and who make decisions about what support and help can be offered. The motion would have effect across directorates and would be fleshed out through appropriate training. This should eliminate the use by staff of insensitive questions or probing into episodes and aspects of our young people's lives which are traumatic to recall and probably immaterial to any decision. Their status of being treated as having care experience as a protected characteristic would ensure that. It would make their lives so much easier and make them less apprehensive when faced with interactions with officialdom in the Council. But the motion goes further. We are, by our nature, a people-facing organisation, and all on the payroll, including us, serve the residents of Derby in some way or other. We signal, by supporting the motion, that we are advocates for our care experienced people in the wider community and to relevant organisations such as the DWP, the NHS, our partners in the voluntary sector and the housing associations in the city, and many others. I should add that Derby Homes is already incredibly supportive of this group and goes the extra mile for them wherever possible. On that, nationally, about 25% of homeless people are care experienced. And at the younger end, 50% of people under 21 have had involvement with the youth justice system. To summarise, in this motion, we hear the collective voice of a group who seek our support and of whom we are the champions par excellence. It's a call to which you must respond by supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Esselgrave. Totally agree with you, and I hope you note that one of my charities is actually Invisible Friends, which supports young children of school age. Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this? Who's seconded in this one? Councillor Mulhall, Jamie Mulhall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, just stop you. Councillor Whitley wants to speak.
No, the councillor's... No, it's Councillor Mulhall who seconded. Does he wish to reserve his right?
I think Paul summed it up pretty eloquently, so I'll reserve my right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I do support this motion, obviously. I've seen many young people leave my care, and to be honest, the support has reduced over the years because councillors simply had less resource. And I know there's been less resource, not just because I'm a councillor, but because I can tell, when they've left my care, it's me they tend to call for support. They don't just suddenly become fully self-sufficient at 18 years old, unfortunately. Mr. Mayor, there is, and there's always been, I'm afraid, negativity and a misplaced fear of children in care and care leavers, and this obviously is a barrier to them. We mustn't forget that these are our children, and therefore we should be giving them every opportunity and consideration like we would for our own children. When a child is in care, we give them an edge. We try to give them an edge. Top of the admissions policies for schools and health, pupil premium plus, to aid their education. But then they turn 18 and the advantages tend to end, I'm afraid. I've also got some quotes from young people Mr Mayor. The first one is, one young person shared that when they mentioned they'd been in care at a job interview, the energy shifted and they feel that this is why they didn't get the job. Another young person said, people care more about dogs than children in care. We are treated like animals. I mean, that one got me, obviously. And the third one, one young person said, if you have a dad who works in an office, he might help you get a job at the office. We don't have that. We just need to level the playing field, Mr Mayor. We need to give care experienced people that small advantage to counter the negativity that is out there. This motion means we'll consider them in everything we do. We're not going out on a limb here. More than half of the country's councils have already passed this motion. So we're just falling into line with everyone else. I urge everyone to support care experienced young people and this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is another motion that's very close to my heart. I've worked with children in care in my professional life, and I've worked with those around children in care, who, you know, the support network. And anyone who thinks that a child who has had the trauma of being taken out of their family home and put into care isn't starting on the back foot, it's just plain wrong. They have, you know, education disruptive, as you say, often are put in with the justice, you know, have interactions with the police. All these things are there that just mean that when they leave care, they are not able to access everything that they deserve and should be as a young person in this country. Because every young person deserves equal treatment, no matter what their background, no matter where they're from, no matter what their family looks like. And if that family looks like a foster care home, that's fine. And every child should be treated equally. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and that is why I am for this motion, because making it a protected characteristic seems like a very good idea, so that at least we are trying to move them forward to where they need to be. When I was a youth worker, I used to play a game with some young people who'd hold up a fiver. Well, you know, we're looking back a long time ago now. Hold up a fiver, and I'd say, right, we're going to have a race. We're going to, you know, and the first person to get to me is going to get this fiver. I'm sure other people have seen this on YouTube, but, you know, I actually have done it. And I would tell them various characteristics that would mean that they would have to take a step back. So, take a step back if you come from a broken home. Take a step back if you are in care. But if you're in care, you have to take 3 steps back. So these children deserve a little bit of a leg up and to come forward and be alongside their peers. Okay, so support this motion. Lovely.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When we discussed bringing this motion at the Corporate Parenting Committee in July and reading through the report from our young people and our success, our voice, I was struck by one of the comments in the report which called for care experienced people to be treated as having a protected characteristic because they would be treated the same as people of their age. I support this motion as children arrive in care for many reasons. None of them are their fault, and it's a massive upset for them with probably long-lasting feelings of being rejected by their family. And also other traumatic events leading up to this. Many children in care don't tell others about this as they fear a negative reaction. As a corporate parent, I have to do the best for them as if they were my own children, and for this reason I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. As a seconder, Councillor Mulhall, do you want to speak now?
No, let's go to the vote.
Thank you. Well,
Mr Mayor, I would like to move to the vote, but I also seek the indulgence of councillors after quite a long meeting. I'm going to ask for support for a recorded vote on this motion. By no means to put pressure on colleagues, you must follow your conscience, but to signal to those in our care that we have heard and hopefully unanimously responded to their heartfelt plea.
thank you, Councillor. Do you want to stand?
Okay, that's carried.
That's carried. Thank you. We'll do the recorded vote.
The vote's recorded, isn't it? The names are recorded. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that will not be a recorded vote, I'm afraid, Chamber. I appreciate it is late, and I thank you for your initiative, but
It's good practice for Craig.
he's learning everyone's names.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No pressure then. I'll try and be as quick as I can. Councillor Amin. Councillor Ashby.
4.
Councillor Atwell.
For myself and everybody else, 4, please.
Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bonza. Councillor Kerr.
4.
Councillor Chambers. Councillor De Hinza. Dinza, sorry. Yeah.
Was that 4?
Councillor Evans. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Folk. Councillor Graves. Councillor Hassel. Councillor Hazelgrave. 4. Councillor A. Holmes. Councillor M. Holmes. Councillor Hudson. Councillor Core. Councillor J. Khan. Councillor S. Khan. Councillor Kozlowski. Councillor Kuss. Oh, sorry. Councillor Lakin. Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Lonsdale. Councillor Morgan McKeegan. Councillor Mahal. Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Anwaha. Councillor Pandy. Sorry. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Peatfield.
4.
Councillor Poulter. Councillor Prosser. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Recton. Councillor Rolls. Councillor Sandu. Councillor Shanker. Councillor Smale. Councillor Swan. Councillor Truella. Councillor Whitby. Councillor Wilson. Councillor C. Wright. Councillor J. Wright. Councillor Potter.
4. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that just about concludes our business for this evening. But there's one gentleman, one councillor, who wants to say a quick word, and I'm going to give him a bit of latitude because I keep getting his name wrong. So.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall withdraw 1 pint from your many accumulated. I know that we shan't be meeting here before the 1st of October. And I just wanted to let councillors know that on the 1st of October, those from the Nigerian community will be celebrating our Independence Day. So I would urge you to please, wherever you meet a Nigerian, wish them a happy Independence Day and please try jollof rice. If you've not, talk to me after this. I shall hook you up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our business for tonight. Thank you for your patience as we have negotiated a very busy agenda, somewhat robustly at times, but hopefully I'll see you all again in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The hints.